Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m. Get a better ready. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon, and a happy new year to everyone. Oh man, it has been... It still feels kind of weird being off for so long now. It's just been chaotic at my actual job, having to reschedule everyone so that we get these few days off, and just seeing family and all this. I had to work the day after Christmas, but New Year's I got off completely. So I've been off for this is my it feels like my third day off in a row, but it's actually only my second. And I still got tomorrow off too. It almost feels like I get an entire week off, even though it's only 3 days. It's kind of surreal, really. But in any case, I went out a few days ago, actually right on Christmas Eve, or not on Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and actually went out and spent all the gift cards I accumulated over the holiday. And I actually went and got myself the Samsung competitor to the Apple Watch. It's called the Gear S2. It is a circular smartwatch that runs on Samsung's own internal operating system called Tizen. What this means is that it's basically limited to a few different smartphones. You pretty much got to have a Samsung one. Although they say it will work on some other ones, I unfortunately only have a Samsung phone, so I can't really test that. What makes it kind of unique is the fact that unlike every other Android phone out there, it does have another method of controlling it. That being there is this. I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's like the bezel on the round surface. You can actually turn it, and that'll actually let you scroll through the various apps and functions of it. Unlike the Apple Watch, where you hit a button and it brings up this huge honeycomb grid, and you just kind of have to pan around until the app you want is kind of focused in the center, and then you tap it. This one, when you bring up the app menu, I'm doing it right now so I can show you. When you bring up the app menu, wherever the heck there it is. When you bring up the app menu, you have a circle of all the various apps, and you can just keep scrolling through the various pages. I like this, except for one problem. When you finally have it selected, the way you select it is by tapping the icon, which then brings up the question, why even bother selecting it with the circle? Because on this, you can just tap any icon you want. The actual cursor serves no purpose other than to scroll through the pages, which currently I only have 3 pages, because I haven't really found very many apps I really like. And that's the reason I haven't found many apps I like, for a couple of reasons. One, because it's Samsung Tizen based. Only people who develop for this watch even have apps available for it. So there's not really a lot of a desire to develop for it. And then 2, what are you even going to put on a watch? Let's be perfectly honest. A lot of the apps for the Apple Watch are very limited and rather silly. Hey look, I put a fart button. Who cares? That's so worthless, it's not even funny. Some people have tried making RPGs on it, on the Apple Watch, and it's just kind of, really? Why did you bother? It just adds up to nothing. Now, granted, on my Pebble, someone else also did that. They actually did make, a really cheesy, plotless dungeon crawler on there, too. And that was also really bad, but still cute. So, there's not very many apps for the watch. On the other hand, how many apps do you really want for the watch? So, I don't know. I really like it. I really do. I haven't found... the interface is much easier to navigate than the Apple Watch. On top of that, you can set it so that there's a minimal clock displayed even when the watch is asleep. Unlike the Apple Watch, when it's asleep, it just looks like your watch died. I honestly really hate that. It just looks like, hey, look at my Apple Watch. You can tell it's an Apple Watch because you can't see anything on it. At least with mine, when you glance at it, it kind of looks like a watch. Like right now, it just has the 2 hands, no numbers on it. But the moment I tap the screen, the watch comes alive. And I've got an actual watch face. It has the temperature on it and the battery life on the watch. Now, I've only had this thing for a few days, but it looks like its battery life is roughly 2 days. I only had it for yesterday for a full day, and it was only at 54% by the time the day was done and over with. So I don't know. I'll keep using it, and if I find anything that's just like a terrible flaw with it, I'll keep you guys updated, and we'll just see how that goes. It'll be a nice little adventure, but so far I love it. It's just so much easier to navigate than every other smartwatch I've tried, except for maybe the Pebble, but the Pebble was also very, very simplistic. There wasn't a lot to it, which was also a lot of its beauty, really. But anyway, for those of you who are first-time listeners, I am Eagle Falcon, and what my show is all about is about technology. We look at technology as it affects the everyday person. We want to stay outside of what I call the New Yorkian bubble or the Californian bubble. A lot of the tech reviewers you see out there, they're in one of these two places. They're either in New York City or they're somewhere in California. And they just assume that society is just as technologically savvy as everyone there. Everyone has the kind of money they have. And that's just like, oh, well, everyone has a high-end smartphone in their pocket and a top-notch laptop. And $1,200 for a laptop is just perfectly fine for them. That is not what we're about here. We are about getting back to reality. Going out and saying, you know what? I had to save up for this watch. It took every single gift card I had and about $100 out of my own pocket to get this watch. That's just how it is. That also means that my workstation here that I record this on probably is not going to get upgraded this year. It might, but it probably won't. My laptop also isn't going to get upgraded this year. I don't know what's going to happen with my laptop, to be quite honest. That's just reality. And that's what we're focused on. We're looking at what technology means for the average person, what the average middle class to lower middle class person can get, and also how some of the more advanced things do affect our lives that we don't see. That's kind of one of the things I look at. Before I was doing this, I ran a used computer company that bought off-lease equipment and resold it to the general public. Servers, laptops, desktops, the whole thing. And just kind of repurposed them. Mostly, it was the laptops that we repurposed. However, occasionally it's kind of nice to look at the servers and see what exactly is the cloud? What makes up the cloud? When I send stuff up and get my emails, what the heck even has it? Those sort of things are nice to look at. For those of you who don't know, those are done by servers. They're very long and narrow computers on a cabinet. And they all work together. There's usually about 42 servers in a rack normally. And they work together and make the websites we explore. Or host your emails. Or store stuff in what's called now the cloud. And it's just nice every so often to see how that's advancing. Because there are companies like HP that will go out there and say, there is a crisis. And that's what we're going to start with today. About, 4 months ago? There was an invented crisis HP made called a density problem. What that means was that their fear was that most servers take up what's called 1 U. Each rack is 42 U's, and each server takes up one of that. And HP, Lenovo, Dell have always been trying to figure out how to get a server in less than a U. One way to do that is called blade servers. And that is you have this cabinet within the cabinet, And then I'm just gonna say Dell off the top of my head, because that one I know. You could get, it was 14 server. No, it was 20 servers in an 8U space. That's an accomplishment. Now your servers are more dense. You can get more processing power in the rack, and you don't need nearly as much foot space to handle all that. Granted, you still need a lot of power to power all this, because each one of these servers is basically a high-powered computer. What HP came up with was a solution they called Moonshot. What Moonshot is I believe this is a 4U system. You look at it, and it looks like a normal 4U rack server, until you grab the handle and pull it out. When you pull this thing out, it looks like a giant dresser drawer that goes in for about 4 feet, which is normal. But then you look into it, and normally where you'd have the lid for the server, you see a bunch of little cartridges. They look like futuristic, I want to say N64 cartridges, but not really. Each one of these cartridges is a server. And I did the count earlier. They don't actually say how many cartridges these blasted things can hold. Unless I click this thing right here and it has it. Yeah, it's not going to do it. Alright, let's just do some quick math. We got 2 rows here, 6 in a row, 3 rows. Alright, so we got 2 columns. It's 6 in a column. There's 3 rows to each column. So 3 times 6, 18. There's 36 servers fit into this 4U space. That's actually impressive. That's extremely impressive. Now the next question is, though, how can you condense a server that much? It doesn't seem possible. And you would be right to be skeptical, because what's normally on these servers is normally you have like 2 10-core processors. And on each one of these cartridges, you are only getting a quad-core processor, one singular. And it's not even a high-powered one. It's at like 1.8 gigahertz. So it's low-powered. You have less storage on there. If you're talking about, if this is for storage, you got to then have a additional device just for storing the data. So there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through to make this work. And in the end, it really doesn't look like this solves much of anything. Now, granted, when I first looked this up when it first launched, they were originally using Atom processors. They were sticking like 4 Atom processors on a board. They still have this option, but they've kind of moved away from that and are actually using full-size, full-powered processors, but not to the same power that servers normally use. So that's better? It's kind of wonky when you really think about it too much. And it's also really a product that really just looks kind of cool to someone like me, who kind of sort of deals with servers on the side. I have a rack server over in the other room that you can't hear because I got like 4 doors closed between me and it that hosts a little game. But this is something I would never get. This is just so much overkill for what I do. And for most high-end applications, they would be looking at multiples of these fully loaded Moonshot chassis. I mean, you're talking a lot of cores, but not a lot of processor, not a lot of power on each core. And it just adds up to, you have a metric ton of cores, an application that can't use that many cores because their limit is only 512. And just what are you doing? It really just boils down to that. On top of that, this solves a problem that doesn't exist. What is really a much better option for breaking down, for solving server density problems, is virtualization. Having one box split virtually into several servers. Like, for example, let's say I have my one let's actually take my desktop here. My desktop is a workstation. It can virtualize. It has enough processing power. I could boot this thing up and say 8 different people could log on it, and it would split the power that this desktop has 8 ways. So each one of those 8 people could theoretically be on their own machine, even though only one machine actually has the power. That's very common in the server world. They intentionally go and get a stupid high-powered server, such as in Dell's case, they have a quad-socket 2U server. And they just split that, like 80 ways because they can. And just say, here, we've got this one server, and now each person has their own core. They can even split it further, splitting the cores even more. It'd be a little slower for each person, but they'd have basically their own thread. And that's kind of a general overview. I could go into greater detail about how virtualization works, how you could split it even more than that, and what the ramifications of that, and also even go into gaming streaming on top of that. But it just basically boils down to what HP is doing here is really neat, could have some very interesting problem-solving capabilities down the road, but for right now, no. It's just no. That's just all it boils down to. It's not really all that useful. Though it is a really cool project. And who knows? It might actually add up to something and actually might solve a density problem, that's 20 years out. For now, it definitely doesn't, though. Just go use your standard x86 stuff, and for the overwhelming majority of people listening to me right now, just don't even worry about it. This is something that just really interests me, is what it boils down to. The fact that we can get servers onto like little cartridges that look like the old Nintendo cartridges we'd get our games on. And to see that much power packed into such a small space, but in the end just being not really here yet. Well, while HP has the Moonshot system as kind of their cartridge-based operation there, they do have another system called Apollo. Apollo is another high-density server system that it's really kind of generic when push comes to shove, really. This sort of stuff's been done for a while in like the old school IBM mainframes, where it's just a whole bunch of specific parts and one cabinet together, working together to basically make one single supercomputer. But what's really interesting about what they advertise, and then you look into, is the fact that they claim this is water-cooled. Here's the problem I have with this thing that is quote-unquote water-cooled. It's not a closed loop. You look up pictures of this thing, and you see copper wires going to these heat blocks, and then the pipes just end. They're pinched off like a normal heat transferring air pipe. I am trying to actually still find pictures that maybe maybe it's not a standard water cooling system. Normally how a water cooling system works is much like on a car or a truck. You pump coolant through a water block. The water block is then attached to whatever you're cooling. Then the water is then also transferred through a radiator through a water pump in a reservoir. And then the radiator has some sort of giant fan on it or series of fans on it that then blow across the radiator and then cooling the liquid after the liquid is then heated up by going through the water block. Now, what could be happening here, and HP just does a terrible job of showing it, is that these heat pipes are then going to a different block system in the rail, and within the rail is when the water transferring is happening. More than likely, the way they explain this is that the radiator and the reservoir are in the cabinet somewhere. But the other problem I have with this is the pictures I see, there is nothing cooling that RAM. There is nothing cooling a lot of this system, actually. You've got something that should be cooling the two GPUs in these systems, which are Tesla-based, and something cooling the CPUs. But there's nothing cooling the RAM, or the North Bridge, or the anything else. Or is it the South Bridge? I am forgetting everything all of a sudden. Regardless, this is a cool idea, and I am surprised when going through this, HP shows nothing about what they're doing here. There's none of the cool little details. You see, if you want to get people on board, show details, man. Just saying, oh, it's water-cooled, and then show pictures that make it go, wait, are you lying? Because it looks like you're lying. And that's the thing. It looks like they're lying. And I can't imagine they'd be so stupid as to lie about being water-cooled and then say that they're water-cooled. It's just that the evidence they show to say how cool they are, it just, none of this adds up. On top of that, when you look at every other node that goes into the Apollo system, a large majority of them are air-cooled. Like they show the rest of them. Like, here's one. It's just a standard blade. There's just two heat sinks, a bunch of RAM on it. No hard drive. I don't know where the storage is going. Probably somewhere else in this monstrosity. There's other ones where they're just not showing anything. Here's one that is just the power supply. So, there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on here. But they just do such a piss-poor job of showing it off that they really just look terrible. Now, granted, if you are in the market for something like this, you are a huge company, you're going to be calling HP directly, and they're going to give you hands-on demos of all this. But if this is your this is your first impression, you would think, at least for the first impression, that they would give a little bit of information to say, draw a company to you instead of going to Dell, or going to Lenovo, or going to the company that is most known for doing nonsense like this, IBM, or Fujitsu. I'm trying to think of any other companies that make high-end servers like this. I think I'm out of them. I think Acer might too, but you're an idiot if you go to Acer. Just don't do that. But that's it for the server portion. I promise we will not get into any more server stuff. In fact, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, I want to talk about how much I hate BS. And there's been way too much BS going around. We'll be right back.
How did I end up here?
Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. One thing I hate the most are clickbait articles. Clickbait is when you make a written, or in this case, a video article to present news, but you word the headline in a fashion that immediately looks shocking. Politics is notorious for this. Saying politician A said we should nuke everything, and then turns out you read halfway through and it says, they said no, we shouldn't do anything of the sort. Those sort of things. This one is from a group called The No. They are a section, I guess, I'm not sure exactly what you say. A department. They are a department of Rooster Teeth. Now, Rooster Teeth I actually like. I do like their humor. I do like their Let's Plays. They are some nice, mindless entertainment to have on one of the screens here while I'm working on something else. This article is an old one. It is from July of 2015. But it just kind of popped up one day in my YouTube feed, just kind of out of the blue, with the clickbait article title of PC Gamers Killing Games ? Now let me explain a little bit about myself. I am pretty much exclusively a PC gamer. I build my own rig. I look to see how I can get a decent powered rig out of low-end parts. I'm the kind of guy who, you tell me, let's go build a $400 gaming PC, and I'll say, yeah, let's do that. I actually know a few ways to do stuff like that. Or turn a used office PC into a gaming PC. These are the sort of things I specialize in when it comes to PC gaming. Now, granted, I'm not a very good gamer. I will never say I'm a good gamer. I'm good at strategy games, but even then I'm terrible at them. Like, you will never see me in a StarCraft 2 tournament. Or any kind of tournament for that fact. Not even chess. But anyway, that's a bit about me. I am pretty much PC gamer exclusive. I do see where console games fit into the world. They are the low-cost option, they are a controlled platform, so you expect your game to be very stable on it, which in most cases in PC platforms, they're not. In PC gaming, games are a bit unstable. You have to kind of alter your settings so that the game plays at the right level for your rig. You don't have to worry about that in the console world. That's where it excels at. PC gaming, you could end up with less frame rates, even though you have more power than a console. But the nice thing about PC gaming is that, a lot like with my current rig, you can get better performance than you can on a console. Like right now, my rig has roughly 4 times the power that an Xbox One has, even though my rig was built way back in 2008. So that's the long way of saying where I come down on the console wars. PC is my preference because I know a lot about it. And in the end, even the one weakness that PC gaming has, which is cost, I can find decent ways around that loophole. Or that barrier, I guess. But anyway, so let's get to the article. PC Gamers Killing Games. What is this nonsense about? Well, it's about a Steam list created by the user Cynical Brit. And it was a list to say which games are locked at 30 FPS. His notion is that games should not be locked at 30 FPS when we're in 2015 and the kind of hardware we have, you should be able to get more out of the games. And to a degree, he's correct. When it comes to frame locking, though, I have to disagree and say that if a game can't handle 30 FPS, or if it's done stylistically, it should remain locked at whatever it's comfortable at. So he makes this list, and I've seen the list. The list actually isn't all that bad. It's really just showing you which ones are locked on it, and if there's any way around it. There are some things that I think really shouldn't have been on there. There are a few really old games that's like, well, what do you expect? The game was built to run on a Pentium 2. It's going to be locked at 30 frames per second. I'm surprised it got up to 30 frames per second. Then there's ones like South Park where it's locked at the same frame rate that the show is, and it should remain at that. There's no reason why you'd want to increase the frame rate on that, because that's part of the whole thing, is that it's an interactive episode of South Park. Now, what really annoys me is that the list is made informatively. The original reason it was made was because the creator does think that we should be able to do better than this. The hosts flat out go and say that this list was made to suggest that any game that's on this list, that the creator of the list said that people shouldn't buy. And that's not the case. It's an informative list. It is clearly an informative list. They have said several times that this is an informative list. But the hosts of this show say that that the reason it's made is that people shouldn't buy a game and it's hurting the industry. It's not. It is helping the industry in two ways. One, it is to be informative. It is to tell you what out there is locked at this, and if you don't like games that are locked at this, that you should avoid them. It's going to be much better than going out buying the game, finding that it is in fact locked at this, then the user gets a refund, and then posts a negative comment. That is going to hurt the game more than just those sort of cynical people who hate 30 frames per second just finding this list and going, oh yeah, well, I won't do that then. That's avoiding a problem altogether. I would argue this actually helps the games more than it hurts them. And then what irks me the most about this is that they say that this list is just the worst thing ever. And then kind of be wishy-washy about the whole thing, kind of midway through. But then at the end, when they try to make their last points, they say like, oh, well, we think that the consumer should be informed, and that lists like this shouldn't exist, that just tell them what they should and shouldn't buy. The list is the reason people are informed! How stupid could these two people be? Like, what are these guys' names? Let me quickly get their names here. Okay, it's even earlier than that. 1 second here. Here we go. We got Adam Kovic and Bruce Green. Both of them are part of the Funhouse team. I don't know if they're the ones who wrote this. If they are, then they're idiots. They really are. And I don't even care if they're going to now like send their fans at me or whatever, because this sort of crap is what makes people think that people like me who play PC games are just on our high horse and always have our finger to our mouths and look down upon the console peasants. No! I hate crap like that. It is infuriating that this sort of garbage is just spread out there by console gamers, automatically assuming that because us PC gamers are trying to inform each other about what's out there, that it just means that, oh, well, we think we're better than everyone. No, it doesn't. And it's terrible to just assume these sort of things. In fact, all this really does to me, and PC gamers like me, is make me think that these guys are idiots. In fact, just look at the dislike bar of this one. It's almost at 50%. It's just, oh god. This one just really made my blood boil when I found it. And if it wasn't for the fact that YouTube just randomly put it on my list out of nowhere, I would have just ignored it. I wouldn't have cared. Oh. Well, moving on. One thing that is rather on a different note completely here. So Windows 10 is basically out in full force. One thing that's kind of overlooked is Windows Phone 10, which is still technically Windows 10. What it is that it's the Windows Phone operating system, but it still runs Windows 10 at its core. It's kind of confusing, but it's just how they marketed it. It does have some very interesting features, Continuum being the big one, where you connect your phone and then to a screen and a keyboard and such, and you basically have a desktop environment. I've unfortunately haven't had a chance to really play with this at all, but I really do want to get my hands on it, just to try it out. Just not enough to make me go out and get a $500 Windows phone and a $100 dock and all that jazz. It'd be very interesting to look at. That's not what I want to talk about, though. I want to talk about Microsoft's move to try and make this real. Right now, there's only a few Nokia phones, which are now called Microsoft phones, that pretty much support Windows 10. I think there's an HTC phone out there. Samsung used to have one, but they discontinued it. There might be a Motorola one. I don't know. But one rumor that's getting much stronger, and is getting stronger with every passing day, is a breakthrough Surface phone. This would end up becoming a lot like what the Surface tablet did. Now, this interests me for a couple of reasons. One, the Surface tablet, although it is technically a tablet, it is more of a laptop than it is a tablet. And in the end, functions a lot better as a laptop than it does a tablet. When it first came out, they tried to make it a tablet and was just completely in denial about it just being some sort of mutant child between a tablet and a laptop. Now, with the Surface 3 and the Surface Pro 4, they have now just finally gave in and said, this is a laptop, basically, in a tablet body. And in the case of the Surface Book, just 100% admitting, this is definitely a laptop. Not even being subtle about it. So what does a Surface phone mean? I don't know. I really don't. If I was to guess, I would say it's going to try and be closer to like a desktop sort of thing. Like right now when I'm actually out on the routes, I have the phone in my pocket, I have a microphone and earpiece wired under my clothes to my right ear, and then I have my Pebble. Now it's my Gear 2. What that allowed me to do was that if I was at a stop and had a question for my boss, I could call him stealthily using the watch, and then I actually could have a conversation with someone else while the boss was feeding information to my ear. There actually was a situation over at a clinic where we were trying to figure out exactly where these two lab coats went. And the entire time, he could hear what they were saying because the mic was sensitive enough. And I still repeated what they said in normal conversation so that he got all the information he needed. Like, he asked me, like, who's the doctors who were there. And then I asked her, like, something like straight out of a spy movie. It was actually kind of cool. I could see Microsoft trying to make something like that more viable. Trying to just actually build this thing to be more of a centerpiece device, not the whole device. And really, I'm starting to see more and more the smartphone just being like a desktop tower that's held in your pocket and just wirelessly connecting to other things that interacts with the phone, such as a smartwatch or like the Internet of Things, those sort of things, like smart light bulbs and such, being able to connect to the smartphone and all being controlled through the smartphone or through a control panel built into the wall, but still using your smartphone as the medium to connect to them all. Something like that I could see Microsoft trying to do. And it all sounds confusing. It's probably just sounded like, 8 minutes of me rambling about the whole thing, but this is going to be something that I really want to keep a close eye on to see if the Surface phone is real, what they plan on doing with it. Does it have a prayer of saving Windows 10 on the phone? Will my prediction that I made last week about Phone OS X just flat out becoming what BlackBerry was, or what it means? Maybe we'll even get a sneak peek of it at CES, which is next week. I don't think so, because if I'm not mistaken, CES no longer has a Microsoft booth in it. I want to say they did bail out. Last year was the first CES without Microsoft. Or was it the year before? God, they all blur together. But in any case, in case you can't tell, coming up next, CES. What's going to be there, and how are we going to handle it here? We'll be right back. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. For those who aren't aware, I record this show the Saturday of every week, usually either towards the afternoon or the evening. So most of my information is usually gathered and all the show prep's done Saturday morning to afternoon. I'm not sure how long CES is going to be this year. I'm pretty sure they said like Tuesday. Unfortunately, a lot of the articles talking about CES don't include the dates of when CES is actually going on. I'm not sure how this happened. It's either that or I'm an idiot and I missed them, which is also quite possible. But it starts next week. The show officially starts on Wednesday. Okay, and now I've got that. But then most likely that means that the big press announcements are going to be Tuesday. And then every single poor sucker who got dragged into CES gets to go see the show floor Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then most likely the show ends on Friday. Most likely. Again, a lot of the articles aren't really saying the dates. So I should have a good roundup next week. Now, depending on how much information I'm able to get, and how much information I find interesting, the show will either be, at minimum, the normal hour with a couple of other things I found sprinkled in, other things that interest me, or I could end up doing multiple shows for that, for the Sunday that they all broadcast. If that's the case, you'll see it just be like CES Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, depending on how many hours it takes me to go through it all. But I'll figure that all out Saturday morning. Unfortunately, I also work that Saturday morning, so it's going to be one heck of a prep. Might be multiple days earlier. But in any case, I've done a little bit of research to see what other people think CES is going to be, and I trust them more than I trust myself for the fact that they have plenty of interns they sucker into checking out the various companies and try to browbeat them into giving information up. And then also their own speculation. The biggest thing that a lot of people are saying are wearables. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. There's going to be wearables at CES. That was like saying there's going to be quadcopters at CES 3 years ago. It was just a no-brainer. I mean, there were quadcopters at CES for like 5 years running, then all of a sudden on the 5th year, that's when all of a sudden they really took off and were finally available to the public, and they just exploded in ways that nobody saw coming. When people start going like, oh my god, hey Eagle, have you ever heard about quadcopters? And it's just like, oh no, they asked me like, you don't know about drones? I'm like, drones? What the heck's a drone? And then they show me, it's like, oh, quadcopters. They're like, what's a quadcopter? Well, that is. See, it has 4 blades on it. They're called quadcopters. It's like, no, they're called drones. Everyone says they're called drones. And it's because I've known about quadcopters because they've been at every CES forever. They've always been in the corner where it's just like, hey, here's the weird thing that will probably never catch on. That's what quadcopters were, and all of a sudden they just exploded. Anyway. This year, the focus is going to be mostly on wearable tech. This includes watches to a lesser extent, but mostly in, quote, smart clothing. This means like having dresses with like light up LEDs in it, socks that measure your blood pressure. Some of them are also looking at technology that could possibly measure your glucose, I think. I'm suddenly forgetting all of my medical terms, and I visit hospitals on a regular basis for my other job. Well, I mean, my other job. My only job. This is still a hobby. Even though I do so much work for this stuff. But of course, there's going to be televisions. There's going to be a big push for virtual reality. I mean, VR is going to be the new quadcopters. We're going to see VR being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. A lot of tech companies are really trying to get VR out there and trying to make it seem a lot more popular than it actually is. Right now, it's not. Really, I think the closest we're going to see it in a while is going to be the HoloLenses that Microsoft is working on. And that I'd actually say in probably 4 years or 5 years, we'll start seeing the HoloLens being adapted into actual eye gear that people use on a daily basis. And it's really going to start looking like a lot of these animes where you already see people have computers built into their glasses and just kind of augmented reality over everything. It's nothing new, really, as far as an idea concept, but it's going to finally be reality in probably like 4 or 5 years, I'm willing to say. I really just got distracted on that, didn't I? Anyway, there's clearly going to be a bigger push towards the Internet of Things, being smart home systems, being able to control your thermostat from a phone, bigger push towards Wi-Fi controlled light bulbs, LED anything, fridge systems that will be able to monitor what food's in them, though that's still going to be a ways out. Those sort of things is what you're going to see at CES. It's pretty much going to be much like what we see every CES, really. There was a big push for a lot of this stuff last year. There's going to be a bigger, harder push for it this year. The Verge in particular does think that cars are going to be a much bigger push this year at CES than they were in the past. Occasionally you'd see like a head unit, a new concept at CES, but nothing real earth-shattering. And I have to agree with them that there's going to be a bigger push on head units that connect with your smartphone, things that use, I think it's Apple Car Kit, I think's the name of it. I don't know. The articles, unfortunately, I got in front of me don't have it. I think it's Car Kit and then Android Auto, I think, are the two names. A bigger push for stuff like that. Car companies having that built in the gate. Because right now, if you wanted stuff like that, you would have to go and get a third-party head unit. And there's some that are out there that are relatively cheap. But more than likely, no. It's not from the factory. GM, I think, supports Apple Auto from the get-go. But we'll see. We'll have to see. It's all speculation at this point anyway. We'll just have to see what CES unfolds. And like I said, I'm going to have plenty of sources to sift through over the week. I'm going to be taking notes. I'm going to have like a small Bible of notes that I may or may not list off when I'm all done. But anyway, that's it for this first episode of the year. If you have any questions, feel free to email them to me at eaglefalcontech@gmail.com. That's it from me, and rest well, everyone. Rest well. And with any luck, this will actually be the first episode to air on iTunes. And if I do manage to accomplish that and actually get this whole system working finally, welcome all my iTunes users. Please feel free to check out my YouTube channel at eaglefalcon at whatever the heck the URL is. Just look up Eagle Falcon on YouTube. You'll find me. No problem. Take care, everyone, and rest well.